I'm Jonah Ellis, 32, the oldest grandson, and at least according to Grandma, her quiet one. The funeral home smelled like lilies and lemon polish, too clean, too bright. I stood in the back, near the double doors, clutching a folded program with Grandma's name misspelled on the cover. No one noticed. Or if they did, no one cared enough to fix it. Everything was white chairs, white roses, white tablecloths covering white urn stands. Even the sky outside the tall chapel windows looked bleached, as if the world itself had run out of color the moment she died. My sister, Camilla, was up front, sitting beside our Uncle Ted like royalty in mourning. She wore pearl earrings and a black sheath dress that fit like it had been tailored for this exact moment. I watched her dab delicately at her eyes with a tissue she wasn't really using. Next to her, Uncle Ted leaned in and whispered something. She nodded solemnly. They looked like they were discussing stock portfolios, not Grandma's life. No one had saved me a seat. A woman in a gray pantsuit funeral staff probably approached and gave me a strained smile. "Hi, you might want to use one of the side chairs." "Sir," she said, motioning toward a sad little row near the wall, behind a potted ficus. "Those up front are for immediate family." I blinked at her. "I am immediate family. I'm her grandson." "Oh," she said quickly, face flushing. "I'm so sorry. I was just going by the list Camilla gave us." Of course she was. Camilla had curated everything guest list, casket photos, even the catering. I'd found out about the funeral through a Facebook post. My name wasn't in the obituary. She called it an oversight. I took the seat behind the ficus. From there, I watched the slideshow play on a screen set up near the pulpit. Grandma as a child. Grandma on her wedding day. Grandma laughing with her sister at Lake Erie. Grandma holding Camilla as a baby. Camilla at ballet. Camilla graduating. Camilla posing with Grandma in her garden. I wasn't in a single photo. Not even one. If you've ever been through something like this, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. The slideshow faded. A murmur spread as people began glancing around. Then Uncle Ted stood up and cleared his throat. "Before we close the ceremony," he said, "I just want to thank Camilla for all her help organizing this beautiful day. And as most of you know, her dedication didn't end there." He reached into his coat pocket and held up a key. The house, Eleanor's house, was left to Camilla in accordance with her wishes. There was light applause. A few people looked back at me, not out of sympathy, out of confusion. Like, "Weren't you the older one?" Camilla stood and gave a little wave, like a pageant queen. "It's what Grandma wanted," she said gently. She said I always reminded her of herself. I felt like my lungs had collapsed. I stayed silent. Even the ficus didn't seem to want me there. Then, just as people began to stand and gather their coats, another voice spoke. Not loud, not theatrical. Just calm and firm, like a thread tightening through the air. "Excuse me," said a man in a navy suit from the back of the room. He held a manila folder in one hand and wore an expression of polite thunder. "I'm Lawrence Benton. I was Eleanor's personal attorney." Camilla blinked. "We already worked with the estate lawyer," she said. Her smile fixed like porcelain. "Yes," he replied. "But Eleanor asked me to deliver this personally. A letter." Everyone froze. What kind of letter?" Uncle Ted asked. His voice pinched. Benton stepped forward, flipping the folder open. "A private codicil. Handwritten, witnessed and notarized. Meant to be read aloud today, after the ceremony." He turned to the audience and read the words slowly, each syllable cracking the air like old floorboards. "To my family, especially my grandchildren, I loved you all. But love like legacy, is complicated. Camilla gets my house. She'll like the light. But Jonah gets the truth. And the truth is in the letter you never knew I wrote. Gasps. Shuffling feet. Someone dropped a purse. Benton looked up. There is a second letter. It's addressed to Jonah Ellis directly. Camilla took a step forward. Jaw tight. That's impossible. No, Benton said, pulling out a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma's sharp, familiar hand. It's not. He walked past everyone, his shoes tapping across the tile, and placed the letter in my lap like a crown of thorns. The entire room turned toward me. The ficus no longer hid me. My fingers curled around the envelope. It was heavier than paper should be. No one spoke. No one moved. Not even Camilla. And for the first time that day, maybe the first time in years, every eye in the room was on me. I felt the air shift. Even the silence had weight now. I didn't open the envelope. Not right away. Lawrence Benton gave me a respectful nod and turned back toward the aisle. You can read it whenever you're ready, he said, then added. But she wanted you to know it changes everything. Camilla still hadn't sat down. She stood near the front row like a statue whose pedestal had cracked, blinking slowly as if trying to reset time. She told me I was the one she trusted, Camilla said aloud, not to anyone in particular. She never mentioned anything like this. A few murmurs rippled behind her. The applause from earlier had dissolved into side eyes and shifting shoes. I stood up quietly, tucking the envelope into the inside pocket of my coat. My legs felt stiff, cold from sitting in the shadows. As I walked past the front row, Camilla hissed under her breath, "Don't think this changes anything." I didn't respond. Outside, the sky was still a washed-out gray. The parking lot stretched silent under a thick cover of clouds, and the wind whipped across the rows of cars with a faint, wintry whistle. I walked toward my beat-up Civic, the one nobody in my family would dare be caught driving. Inside the car, I just sat. I didn't start the engine. I didn't cry. I just held the envelope in my hands and stared at the handwriting that only Grandma used. Slanted, neat, stubborn. She used to label every mason jar in her basement that way: peach jam, dill pickles, wild grape jelly, 2006. This was her. This was real. Still, I hesitated. I thought about what would be in the letter. Was it going to be sentimental? A confession? A riddle? Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe just a final, "I love you," and a note that said, "I'm sorry you were forgotten." I opened it. The paper was thick. A pale blue linen sheet, folded once down the middle. I unfolded it slowly. Her scent lavender and old wood still clung to the fibers like memory itself. Jonah, if you're reading this, then Camilla's already claimed the house, the heirlooms, and probably told you it's what I wanted. Let her. That part is true, but what you have is more than a house. Remember the attic? The one I told everyone to keep locked. It's not empty. The key is still taped behind the third brick from the left in the basement wall. Look there first. There's a reason you were always the quiet one. You listened. You noticed things no one else did. And you never needed a spotlight to matter. I saw that. I just couldn't say it enough. Everything I didn't say is in the attic. You'll understand when you see it. Love you more than I ever said aloud. Grandma Eleanor. The paper trembled in my hands. I leaned back in the seat, breathing shallow, as if the world had cracked open somewhere just beneath my feet. There was something in the attic, and she'd kept it for me. I didn't drive straight to the house. First, I stopped at my apartment, a one-bedroom unit on the south side that smelled like dust and last month's takeout. I changed clothes, pulled on an old hoodie, grabbed a flashlight, and left without saying a word to anyone. Camilla wouldn't go there yet. She'd be having lunch with Uncle Ted, or fielding condolences, or giving her version of the story to anyone who would listen. The drive across town was quiet. I played no music. My thoughts buzzed louder than any melody could have. When I pulled up in front of Grandma's house, the porch light was still on, even though it was midday. It looked the same. White siding, blue shutters, a porch swing that creaked when the wind hit it right. The lawn was overgrown. Grandma used to scold herself for letting it get wild, but the wild suited it now. I used the spare key under the frog statue. Inside, the house still smelled like cinnamon and cedar. Her afghan still draped over the couch. The china hutch was sealed. Her bird clock ticked softly over the mantel, and the hallway runner still buckled slightly in the middle. I moved quietly, like I might wake her. Down in the basement, I found the brick she described, third from the left. I pried it gently with a screwdriver I kept on my keyring. Behind it, there it was, yellowed masking tape holding a small rusted key. My hands were sweating. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, past the guest bedroom, past the linen closet. The attic door was at the end of the hallway, always locked, always off limits. I used to think it was full of old quilts or broken chairs. The key clicked in the lock. I turned the knob. It smelled of dust and paper. The light bulb overhead flickered on with a tug of the cord. The space was packed, not with junk but with trunks, labeled boxes, wooden shelves filled with binders and books. It was an archive. Each box was labeled in Grandma's handwriting. Some were marked letters 1950, 1970. Others said land documents, adoption papers, family loans paid, and one near the corner read, "Jonah, do not open until after." I sat cross-legged on the old attic floor, pulled the box toward me, and lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of letters, some from me. As a child, birthday cards I barely remembered sending. She'd kept all of them. But beneath that, there were documents, photocopies, bank slips. A handwritten will dated 2 years before the official one Camilla had pushed through probate, and one file folder marked simply, July 3rd, Camilla. Inside, it was a check stub for $42,000. Grandma's handwriting said, "Don't tell Jonah. It'll only hurt him." Another page. A contractor's invoice for repairs dated just 2 weeks before Grandma's health started to decline, all addressed to Camilla. Paid in cash. The final sheet. A note. "Camilla convinced me not to tell you I was selling stocks to pay her debts. I felt ashamed, but you always deserve the truth." I sat back, breath caught in my throat. She knew, and she tried to protect me. I sat there for a long time. The house creaked above and below, like it was breathing around me. Then I heard the front door open. Footsteps. Heels on hardwood. I knew that rhythm. Camilla. She'd arrived. Her heels clicked against the wood like gunshots. Camilla never entered a room quietly, even when we were kids. She moved like she owned the air around her flipping hair, slamming doors, laughing too loud in places meant for silence. I didn't panic. I didn't even move. I just sat still in the attic, holding that last page in my hand while her footsteps echoed across Grandma's old floorboards. "Jonah," she called. Her voice was low but carried an edge, like a threat wrapped in fake concern. I heard the pause the moment she realized I'd unlocked the attic door. "You're not supposed to be in there," she said, louder now. I folded the papers neatly and placed them back into the box. Then I stood up. The floor creaked beneath me. She appeared in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame like she needed it to steady herself. Her lipstick was fresh. Her heels matched her handbag. She looked like she was attending a second funeral. "I asked you a question," she said. "What are you doing in here?" "I read the letter," I said calmly. "Which one?" Both. Her expression flickered. There's nothing in here that matters. You know that. Right. Grandma was confused near the end. She wrote things down that weren't real. She left receipts. I said, stepping forward. Bank transfers. Dates. Even your contractor's invoice. You let her drain her savings while you promised me everything was fine. Camilla's mouth twisted. She wanted to help me. She didn't want me to know. I said. She wrote that in her own hand. She took a step into the attic, her gaze sweeping the shelves. It doesn't matter now. Jonah, I have the house. The will's been processed. This, she waved a manicured hand at the dusty archive, is just sentimental trash. You think it's trash because it doesn't shine with your name on it. She laughed once. You're always trying to act like the victim. You could have helped her more. You barely visited. I was the one bringing her groceries and managing her meds. Because you never told me she needed help. I said, louder now. Every time I called, you said she was fine, that she didn't want company. Camilla crossed her arms, leaning against a support beam. You think this changes anything, no? I said. I think it reveals everything. We stared at each other. A silence older than either of us thick between us. Then she asked, What do you want? Jonah. I took a breath. Nothing. That surprised her. I don't want the house, I added. You can keep it, but I'm taking what's mine. I pointed to the box labeled with my name. She left this for me, and you're not touching it. She hesitated. So what, you're gonna play historian now? Dig up dead secrets, no? I said. I'm just going to remember her the right way. Camilla's lip curled. Whatever. Stay up here with the dust and fairy tales. I've got an open house scheduled next week. She turned and walked out. This time, her heels didn't echo. Over the next few days, I went back to the attic every night. I read her letters. I cataloged old photos, faded newspaper clippings, letters she'd written to people who'd never answered. There was one letter she'd written to herself. A small, folded note dated 5 years ago. It simply said, I don't know how to stop loving people who hurt each other. I sat with that one a long time. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting on her porch while she mended a torn garden glove. I'd asked her why she didn't just buy a new pair, because these have memories in them. She said, You don't throw away what remembers you. I think that's why she kept everything. Not because she was sentimental, but because memory was sacred to her. One box held old cassette tapes. I borrowed an old player from a thrift shop to listen. There she was, singing lullabies to herself. One recording was her describing her childhood in vivid detail, working in a factory, falling in love at 16, losing a baby no one ever talked about. She hadn't told anyone these things, but she'd saved them. For me. On the 4th night, I found the last item in the far corner of the attic, a small cedar chest, locked, with a tiny brass nameplate, Jonah. I pried it open gently, no key this time, just an old latch. Inside was a single velvet pouch. I opened it, expecting jewelry or coins. It was a small pin, a silver feather. I recognized it immediately. When I was a child, Grandma used to wear it on her coat in the winter. She said it was from someone special, but she never explained. I once asked her what it meant. She smiled and said, It reminds me of people who land gently, even when the world tries to drop them hard. I'd forgotten that until now. Beneath the pin was a final note. You never needed to be loud to be seen. I saw you. Always. I closed the chest and placed it near the door. The day Camilla hosted the open house, I made one last visit. I walked through each room, slowly. I touched the banister we used to slide down. I ran my hand along the kitchen tile where Grandma used to cool pie crusts. I stood at the window where I once watched fireflies with her. A mason jar between us. Then I taped a copy of her letter to the inside of the attic door. Let the next owner read it. Let them feel her. Let her memory live where it was meant to. As I left, Camilla stood on the porch talking to a real estate agent. She didn't look at me. I didn't look back. I had what mattered. Not the deed, not the title, just her voice, her truth, her feather. That night, I placed the silver pin on my coat pocket. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere, not in a house, in a story. And it was mine now. I didn't go home after that. Not to my apartment. Anyway. Instead, I drove to Lake Morley, the place Grandma used to take us when we were kids. It was only an hour away, tucked behind dense woods, with picnic tables older than some towns. The dock was still there, splintered and faded, leaning slightly like it wanted to sink but hadn't found the courage. I parked the car, stepped out into the early evening air, and for a moment, everything felt still. The kind of stillness you don't notice until you've been drowning in noise for too long. I walked to the edge of the dock with the cedar box in one hand, the box that had my name, the pin already on my coat. I didn't come here to toss anything into the lake. I came here because this place was where Grandma taught me how to skip stones. It was where she said, "Sometimes life ripples long after the throw." I sat at the end of the dock and watched the sun curl low behind the trees. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just let the quiet in. A week passed before I heard from Camilla again. Not a call. A text. 3 words. "We need closure." I didn't answer. She tried again the next day. This time, longer. "The agents are asking about the attic. There are questions. I told them you were just collecting junk. I need you to confirm that." Still, I said nothing. By the end of the week, she left a voicemail. Her voice was different. Tired. Strained. "Jonah, I don't know what Grandma wrote. I don't want to fight. But if you're planning on doing something with that stuff, if you're going to make me out like some villain, I just want a chance to explain. Okay, I didn't mean to steal anything. I just..." She always told me I was the strong one. That last sentence stayed with me. I remembered the day Grandma sat us both down after Dad's accident. We were still teenagers. Camilla had been crying, furious, throwing blame like knives at the wind. Grandma had turned to her and said, "You're strong, Millie. But Jonah is steady. I need you both." That day, I felt invisible. Now I understood she wasn't choosing between us. She was preparing us to carry different weights. I finally messaged Camilla back. "Come to the house. Just you. I'll be in the attic." She arrived an hour later. No heels this time. Just sneakers, jeans, and a sweater that looked borrowed. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup. She climbed the attic steps slower than I expected. When she reached the top, she didn't look around. She looked straight at me. "I thought you'd go public," she said quietly. "I'm not interested in public," I replied. "Just the truth." She nodded, swallowing hard. I read her will again. The real one. The old one. She was going to split everything at first, evenly. Then it changed. "I know," I said. "After you lost your job, after the debt collectors started calling." Her eyes flared. "She told you that?" "No," I said. "She wrote it. And you made sure I stayed out of it." She sat on the floor, slowly, cross-legged like we used to when we were kids building Lego castles. Her hands folded in her lap. "I was drowning," she said. "After the layoffs, after everything, I didn't know what else to do." And she offered, "I didn't lie. I didn't steal. I just accepted. You kept me in the dark because you'd judge me," she snapped. "You always had this calm, clean life. No chaos. No wreckage. I didn't want to be your messy sister." I leaned back against a beam. You weren't messy. You were just scared. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "Why didn't she just tell me she left that box for you?" She didn't want more damage. She thought hiding the truth might keep the family together. Camilla laughed bitterly. Yeah, that worked out great. I reached over to a nearby shelf and pulled out a binder. She didn't just leave a box. She left this. Notes. Memories. Old recipes. Poems she never shared. Sketches of garden layouts. Plans to fix the back fence. It's all here. Camilla blinked. She sketched the garden every year. She never showed me those. Because you weren't looking, I said, softer than I meant. Camilla exhaled and lowered her head. Do you think she forgave me? She didn't need to. I said. She just kept loving you. Camilla wiped her cheek. I wanted so badly to be the favorite. You were, I said. So was I. That's the part neither of us saw. Before she left, I gave her one of the tapes. Listen to it, I said. It's her reading Little Women to us when we were 6. You were sick. I'd just had a nightmare. She stayed up all night reading from that ratty paperback she kept by the stove. Camilla took the tape in both hands. Her fingers trembled. I don't have a player, she said. Buy one. I told her. Some memories are worth the effort. She paused at the attic door. Are you going to keep all this? I don't know yet. I said. Maybe. Maybe not. But it's not leaving this house while it still feels like her. She nodded. You were always the one who remembered details. You were always the one who took charge. And look where it got us, she said with a sad smile. Then she was gone. Later that week, I visited the nursing home where Grandma had spent her final weeks. I asked the nurse if they had any of her personal items left behind. She brought me a small plastic bag, a hairbrush, her reading glasses, a notebook, and a napkin scribbled with 3 words. Jonah sees everything. That broke me. I sat in my car for an hour afterward, just holding that napkin like it was gold leaf. She saw me, through everything. And suddenly, the house, the arguments, the secrets, they all felt smaller. The weight was still there, but it wasn't unbearable anymore. Camilla eventually sold the house. She invited me for one last walkthrough before the new owners moved in. We didn't talk much, just moved room to room, naming small things only we would know. The hallway where we used to play tag, the tile in the kitchen that had a crack shaped like a lightning bolt, the creaky stair that always betrayed sneaky feet. When we reached the attic, we didn't go in. We just stood at the door. She'd be furious if she saw us standing here. Silent, Camilla said. She'd make us scrub the floor just to get us talking. I smiled. Camilla laughed. For real this time. Then she said, You keep the box. I'll keep the tape. That feels fair. And it did. I moved back into my apartment with one new piece of furniture, a narrow shelf I built myself from old attic wood. I placed the feather pin on the top. Next to it, the binder, the cassette tape, her reading glasses, and the napkin with her last message to me. No one visits much, but every time I look at that shelf, I hear her voice, whispering, steady, constant. Jonah sees everything, and I do. Now, finally, I do. After Camilla sold the house, I found myself drifting. Not physically. I still lived in the same small apartment, still walked the same 2 blocks to the corner store where the clerk never asked questions. But inside, something felt suspended. Like I'd been living with a kind of pressure for years, an invisible weight that had finally lifted, and I wasn't sure what to do with all that empty air. I started waking up earlier than usual. No alarm. Just my body responding to the quiet. At first I thought it was restlessness, but eventually I realized it was something softer than that. Curiosity, maybe, or peace. One morning, I opened the binder Grandma left me and flipped through her garden plans, meticulous diagrams of rose bushes and tomato patches, scribbled notes about soil acidity, moon phases, and watering rhythms. There were arrows pointing to where she wanted to build a small sitting bench. A note in the corner read, "Jonah could help with this someday." She'd written it 5 years ago. I closed the binder and let my hands rest on the cover. Then I grabbed my keys and walked to the community garden 3 blocks away. It was nothing like hers, overgrown in some parts, too structured in others. But there was a plot open, a square of earth between 2 chain-link fences. I put my name down. That afternoon, I started digging. For a while, I didn't tell anyone. Not Camilla, not the few friends I still saw every couple of weeks. The garden became my pocket of silence, a place where things made sense. You plant something, you water it, you give it time and it grows. Or it doesn't. But at least the rules are honest. Each week, I'd bring a few things from the attic box to sit beside me while I worked. A letter, a recipe. Once, a photo of Grandma when she was 21, sitting on the hood of a car with her hair tied in a scarf and her eyes full of wind. I never talked to the other gardeners, not until late April, when a woman named Corinne asked if I was the guy who brought a typewriter out one afternoon. I'd forgotten I even did that. "Your grandmother's letters," she said, wiping dirt from her brow. "I saw the envelope when you left it on the bench. My Nana used to write with the same kind of ink. Parker Quink. I'd know the smell anywhere." I smiled. "Yeah, that sounds like her." We talked. A little at first, then more. Corinne was older, maybe 55, a widow who'd lived in the neighborhood forever. She had a voice like gravel and chamomile. She never asked anything too directly. Just let me talk when I wanted to. One day, I told her about the attic, about the pin, the tapes, the letter. She listened quietly, then said, "She left you her memory." That's the part people forget. Some things aren't inherited, they're entrusted. That line stuck with me for days. Entrusted. By May, Camilla sent me another message. This one was simple. "I want to see what you've done with it." She meant the garden. I debated for 2 days. Then I said okay. When she showed up, she had a paper bag with lemonade bottles and cookies. No makeup again. This time, she wore boots. She walked along the edge of the soil bed like she was afraid to step too close. "This is nice," she said. "It's unfinished," I replied. "That makes it honest." She shrugged. We sat on the grass and shared the lemonade. She looked around at the other gardeners, the wild plots, the buzzing of bees in the lavender near the fence. She would have liked this, Camilla said. She always wanted a garden with benches. She sketched one for the backyard. I said, "Had it labeled and everything?" Camilla stared out for a moment, then reached into her bag. She pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth. "I was cleaning out some boxes and found this," she said. It belonged to her. I unwrapped it. The bingo queen pin Grandma used to wear on Wednesday nights. Gold with little fake diamonds. One of them missing. I remembered how she used to tap it for luck before calling the final number. She wore that for a decade. I said, smiling. "I figured you'd keep it better than I would," Camilla said, then paused. "Do you think she forgave me?" "You keep asking that," I said. Why Camilla looked down? Because I never really asked her to? I just assumed she had to. Like it was part of her job. I nodded. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe she knew we'd both end up here. Digging through dirt. Building something. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I can't believe how much I missed by trying to be the only one who mattered. That's the thing about being the favorite, I said. It makes you think you have to hold everything alone. She blinked, like the wind had gotten into her eyes. Thanks for letting me come, she whispered. Thanks for not turning it into a real estate pitch. She chuckled. I'm retired from all that. I raised an eyebrow. Well, I'm trying. I took a job at the library downtown, shelving books. It's quiet. Quiet's not so bad, I said. No, she said. It's not. That summer, the garden bloomed. My tomato vines climbed the wire cages like they knew where they were going. The lavender spread. Bees came in droves. I planted marigolds along the edge, like Grandma once did, to keep the gossiping bugs out. Every Sunday, I brought something from her archive, a recipe, a clipping, a note, and I'd share it with Corinne and, sometimes, with Camilla. We never made it a ritual. That would have felt too formal. It was just what we did. One Sunday, I brought the tape player. I didn't even know if it would work. I'd cleaned the heads, replaced the belt, found batteries. I popped in the tape labeled Fireplace, Winter, 1997. We sat there, me, Camilla, Corinne, and 2 kids from the neighboring garden plot. The tape crackled, then her voice floated out. Once upon a time, there were 2 children who didn't know how strong they were. Camilla gasped. Her hand clutched her knee, her eyes closed. But the tears leaked out anyway. The kids didn't understand, but they sat still. Even Corinne leaned forward slightly, as if catching a familiar breeze. And even when the world got loud, they learned how to listen with their hearts. Her voice was tired, warm, fraying at the edges, but it was hers. That tone, that cadence, alive. We sat in silence long after the tape clicked off. No one said anything. No one needed to. That night, I returned home and opened her final envelope, the one marked, to be read after peace. Inside was a small photograph of me and Camilla, both age 4, holding dandelions under the porch light. On the back, she'd written, "Even weeds look like wishes when the light hits right." I taped it to my wall, right above the shelf. Then I turned off the lights and let the room go still. I never planned to turn Grandma's letters into anything public. But one morning in late July, I found myself rereading a poem she'd written tucked into an envelope labeled "For Rainy Sundays." It was handwritten in fading ink on the back of an old grocery receipt. The poem was short, barely 10 lines, about silence and seasons, and the sound of chairs scraping across a kitchen floor. And it hit me how much of her was stored in things meant to be thrown away. That's when I opened a blank document and titled it, "The Quiet Things We Keep." I didn't know if it would be a book, a blog, a private collection. I just needed to write. I started transcribing her letters, then added my own notes, small reflections on the memories they sparked. The way certain phrases sat in my chest like loose stones. I worked on it every night, at the kitchen table, the pin still clipped to my coat hanging by the door. By week 3, I had over 30 pages. I shared it with no one. Not yet. It was a strange thing, spending so much time with someone who was gone but who felt, page by page, more present than anyone else in my life. Camilla and I kept talking. Not every day, but often enough. She sent me a picture of her library name tag Millie E., not Camilla. Millie, what Grandma used to call her before she insisted on being taken seriously. Going backwards helps sometimes. She texted. I replied. Or maybe it's the only way forward. We had lunch once at a cafe that had been Grandma's favorite when it still served fried okra. It didn't anymore, but we sat at the same corner booth. Camilla brought a binder. Found more. She said, old letters from Grandma, mostly shopping lists, clipped recipes, a few notes to her garden supplier. Nothing dramatic. I leafed through it. Even her shopping lists have voice. I know. Camilla smiled. She once wrote, "Buy bread that forgives teeth." Took me years to realize she meant soft sandwich rolls. We laughed. Then Camilla's smile faded. "I've been thinking," she said, "about how much of her we didn't know. Not because she hid things, but because we didn't think to ask." I nodded slowly. She wasn't waiting for questions. She just lived, and left what she could behind. Camilla stirred her coffee. "What are you going to do with all of it? The letters, the photos?" I hesitated, then told her about the quiet things we keep. Her eyes didn't narrow. They didn't flash with jealousy. They softened. "Can I read it someday when it's ready?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It already is." I finally let Corinne read it too. She took the pages home and returned them 3 days later, paper-clipped and dog-eared. She wrote like she was whispering in the dark. Corinne said, "People need to hear that. I'm not sure I want it to be public." I said, "Some of it feels sacred." Corinne nodded. "But sacred doesn't always mean secret." I let her words sit with me. That night, I pulled out the last envelope Grandma had written to herself, the one that simply said, "For after everything." Inside was a photograph. Not of us, not a family, just a maple tree in fall. The sky behind it was that smoky October gray, and a single leaf was caught mid-fall, frozen in motion. On the back, her handwriting again. "Leave them one thing that moves." I stared at that for a long time. Then I made my decision. The community center hosted small readings every other month, mostly amateur poets, high school essay winners, retired teachers telling fishing stories. I signed up under a fake name Quinn, just to avoid any attention. I planned to read 2 of her shorter letters and 1 of my reflections. Camilla came. She sat in the back with her arms crossed, pretending to be uninterested. But I saw her eyes. They were the same as mine that night in the attic, ready to hear what hadn't been said. When I stepped up to the mic, I could barely breathe. The room smelled like dusty carpet and weak coffee. My palms sweat through the printed pages. But I spoke. "Dear Jonah, I saw the way you stood behind the ficus at the funeral. I'm sorry they didn't save you a seat. If I could do it again, I'd walk straight to you and ask everyone else to move. Somewhere between the second paragraph and the final line." I stopped trembling. When I finished, there was silence, then applause. Camilla stood up first. She clapped until her hands turned red. Word spread faster than I expected. The local paper asked if I'd share more. I declined, but I agreed to a small printing, just 50 copies bound simply. No author photo, no fanfare. Just a blue linen cover and the title, "The Quiet Things We Keep." Camilla paid for the printing. She didn't ask for her name to be in it. But I included a line in the dedication to the one who once kept everything, and the one who let it go. By autumn, the garden was fading, the vines browned, the flowers curled in on themselves, but the soil still held memory. I dug up the last of the carrots and saved the smallest one for Corinne. She said it looked like a question mark and put it on her windowsill. Camilla came by with 2 small ceramic planters. She'd started painting in the evenings, soft, abstract things. One of the pots had a feather, the other, a single dandelion seed. "I thought you might want to keep growing things inside," she said. "I do." One night in November, I found myself holding the tape player again. I pressed play. Her voice came on like it always did, warbling through dust and time. "The thing about stories, Jonah, is they don't end. They echo. So leave echoes you can stand beside." I closed my eyes. I listened. And for once, I didn't feel like the quiet one. I felt like the keeper, the one she'd entrusted, the one who finally understood how to land gently, even when the world dropped hard. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. There was no big family table, no parade of casserole dishes, no passive-aggressive toasts. For the first time in a long time, Camilla and I agreed to keep it small, just the two of us. In her new apartment above the library where she worked. She cooked. I brought wine. We both avoided the subject of who used to carve the turkey. Her place was modest but cozy. Plants in the windowsill, a small bookshelf shaped like a tree, and in the center of the dining table between the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce sat the old feather pin in a shallow ceramic dish. "She belongs here," Camilla said when she caught me looking. "I thought you wanted me to keep it?" I replied. "I did." She nodded. "But now I think maybe we both do." After dinner, she put on an old playlist Grandma had once made for us, burned onto a CD with Sharpie handwriting and labeled Sunday Rain, Nina Simone, Billie Holiday, a little James Taylor. I'd forgotten how much music used to live in our childhood. Camilla got up and started clearing plates, humming along. I stayed seated, staring at the empty chair across from mine, the one we didn't fill. "Do you ever feel like she's just watching us mess this up, Les?" I asked. Camilla laughed under her breath. "Not really watching. More like eavesdropping." I raised my glass. "To eavesdropping ghosts." She raised hers too, and quiet things that echo. We clinked. It was the first toast in years that didn't hurt. Later that weekend, I visited the grave. It was tucked beneath a large elm tree at Hollowbrook Cemetery, marked with a simple headstone she'd chosen herself years before her passing. Just her name, Eleanor Ruth Ellis, and the words, "She remembered." I brought no flowers, just a letter, not hers, mine. It wasn't long, just a few lines on the same kind of blue linen paper she used to write on. I placed it beneath the smooth stone and weighed it down with a pine cone. "I see you now. Every inch. Every echo. Thank you for saving me from being invisible even when I didn't know I needed saving." I didn't stay long. The wind was sharp, biting through my coat. But as I turned to leave, I swear I heard the creak of a garden swing. There was no swing nearby, only memory. And maybe that was enough. In early December, a local bookshop asked to host a small reading for The Quiet Things We Keep. I hadn't expected it to travel so far, but the 50 original copies sold out within a week, mostly by word of mouth. Someone shared a few passages online, someone else printed them on postcards. Then a woman from Colorado emailed to say she read her mother's eulogy using one of the letters. I agreed to the reading on one condition: no press, no stage, no microphone, just chairs, a lamp, and a circle of people willing to listen. Camilla came again. So did Corinne. Even Uncle Ted showed up. He sat in the back, arms crossed, face stiff. But when I read Grandma's note about skipping stones at Lake Morley, he laughed quietly. Later, he told me it reminded him of how she once threw her shoe into the lake because it looked too proud. She always hated proud shoes. I replied. That night, after the reading, a woman around my age approached me. She had long red curls and a cautious smile. "Hi," she said. "I'm Nora. I work at a hospice in town. One of our patients had your book on her nightstand. She said it made her feel remembered." I didn't know what to say, so I said, "Thank you." She handed me a note. She passed last week, but she wanted you to have this. Inside was a card with shaky handwriting. I didn't grow things, but I kept every recipe card my mom ever touched. Thank you for making that feel important. I kept that card in my wallet. Still do. A few days before Christmas, Camilla and I returned to the house. The new owners were a retired couple who'd invited us over for tea after discovering a few of Grandma's old clippings sealed beneath a cabinet drawer. They'd preserved the attic, not the full archive, of course, but the structure, the old wooden beams, the cedar smell, even the creaky light bulb. They'd turned it into a reading nook. There, on the wall near the window, framed in simple glass, was the first letter Grandma ever wrote to me. Jonah, you are the quiet hum in my favorite room, the one no one else notices, but without it, the light feels colder. Camilla cried, openly, no performance, no restraint. The new owner handed her a tissue and said, "We feel her here. She's in the floors." And she was. On Christmas Eve, we lit a candle, not for tradition, just for her. We set it in the window between our two apartments, the one hallway between us where we used to avoid each other. Now it was where we met. Camilla brought gingerbread cookies, I brought mulled wine, and together, without ceremony, we played the tape one last time. Her voice, low and warm. Even if they forget your name, they'll remember the way you made space. In the first week of January, I submitted a formal request to the local historical society, a proposal for a permanent archive space dedicated to ordinary lives. Letters, recipes, sketches, voice recordings, pieces of people who never became famous but were never invisible either. They approved it. Camilla helped me set it up. We called it the Feather Room. People brought in boxes of old napkins with handwriting, dried wedding corsages, cassette tapes, postcards from places that no longer exist. We didn't sort them by category. We just let them live. One woman submitted her mother's shopping list from 1984. Another donated a pair of ballet slippers with a note. She never made it to the stage, but she danced in the living room every night. That was the point. Not to curate, but to remember. The day we hung Grandma's pin in the center of the Feather Room, Camilla whispered something so quiet I almost missed it. She would have hated how sentimental we turned out. I grinned. Yeah, but she also saved every birthday card shaped like a teacup. Camilla smirked. Touché. I still visit the garden, even in winter. I bring something to plant. Not seeds, just thoughts. Just pages I tear from notebooks and bury in the soil like time capsules. A month ago, a small paper sprouted next to the lavender bush. Someone else's letter, folded carefully and tucked under a flat rock. It read, "To whoever reads this, I was quiet my whole life. Thank you for making quiet people feel like thunder." I never found out who wrote it, but I left a reply beside it. We are the ones who echo longer. And then I walked home. No spotlight, no audience, just the slow warmth of something sacred being shared. February came like a soft hush. Snow coated the sidewalks, muffling even the sirens downtown. I kept the window cracked most days just to feel the sting of cold air on my knuckles while I typed. It reminded me that I was still here, that something had shifted not in the world, maybe, but in me. The Feather Room started to draw visitors, quiet ones, mostly. A father and daughter who walked through without speaking. A young man who cried at a stranger's thank you note scrawled on the back of a diner receipt. A woman who left a Polaroid of her mother in a wedding dress with a scribbled message. She said yes, even when her hands shook. Every artifact came with something unsaid. That was the rule. No items without context. You didn't have to explain everything, just a sentence, a gesture, a timestamp. It wasn't a museum. It was a conversation. Camilla called it Eleanor's Garden of Ghosts. I liked that, even if it didn't make sense to everyone. One day, I brought in Grandma's recipe book, not to display, but to copy. I started retyping each card by hand, even the ones stained with tomato sauce or melted wax. Not because I wanted to preserve perfection, but because I wanted to honor the mess. On the back of her molasses cookie recipe, she'd written, Some days you measure, some days you guess. That's okay. That line ended up becoming the subtitle of the entire archive. Corinne stopped by one Saturday with hot cider and a new story. A woman donated a shoelace yesterday, she said, laughing. I asked her why, and she said, "It's the one I tied when I decided to run from him." I blinked. That might be the best thing in the room. She also gave me a sandwich, Corinne added. People grieve weird. I shrugged. They remember weird too, she said. We sat in the center of the feather room that afternoon and watched the sunlight shift across the wall of pinned items. There was no order to the display, just clusters of human moments breathing beside each other. A wrinkled napkin next to a lock of hair. A bus ticket beside a photo of a cat named Leo. It was messy. It was beautiful. Like Grandma's attic. Like my life. Like hers. That night, Camilla called. Do you remember that silver compact she always kept in her purse, she asked. The one with the cracked mirror, I said. She used to call it truth serum. Exactly. Camilla laughed. Well, I found it. In a box marked "Don't peek unless you mean it." What was inside? Nothing, she said. Just the mirror. Still works. No. She paused. It reflects upside down. Maybe that's the point. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, I'm proud of you, Jonah. I didn't answer right away, because my throat closed. Because sometimes kindness takes longer to land. Because part of me still thought she'd never say it. Thanks. I finally managed. I'm proud of you too. Millie. A few weeks later, the library invited us to set up a rotating display. They cleared out a corner near the local history section and called it Echo Shelf. Camilla oversaw it. I stocked it with pieces that changed every month. The first display was simple. A folded letter with no envelope, a black and white photo of a young couple in winter coats, a rusted house key, Grandma's feather pin. No placards, no explanations, just a small wooden sign that said, What remains? People left notes under the glass. Most just said thank you. Some shared stories. A few asked if they could donate something. Camilla and I read every message. We cried over 3. We kept them in a shoebox beneath the counter. Spring arrived in sputters. Rain. Then sun. Then rain again. The garden came back slower this year. I'd buried one of Grandma's letters beneath the time patch and forgot about it until the plants bloomed around a small corner of blue paper peeking out. I left it there. The weather had washed the ink away. But I didn't mind. It had returned to the soil. Camilla showed up one Sunday with a pair of gloves and a small pot of violets. She used to grow these on the windowsill, she said. She said they reminded her of small victories. I like that, Camilla said. It makes me feel less like a failure. You're not, I said. She didn't respond, but she smiled as she dug. We worked in silence for a while. Then I asked, Do you think we're done grieving her? Camilla shook her head. Grief isn't something you finish. It's something you learn to carry better. I let the words settle. Some days it still feels like she's going to call. I admitted. She does, Camilla whispered. Just not with a phone. That summer, The Quiet Things We Keep was picked up by a small indie publisher. They didn't want to change a word. They loved the anonymity of it, the quiet reverence, the refusal to explain. They printed 3,000 copies. I gave away most of mine. 1 copy sits in the library, 1 in the feather room, 1 in my apartment on the shelf beside her pin, the old napkin, and the cassette tape, I now know by heart. The rest I left them in waiting rooms, bus stops, thrift stores. I taped one to the inside of a bathroom stall at a rest area. I mailed one to a return address I found on a decades-old postcard in the attic. Camilla left one in a cab. Corinne slid hers into a church pew with a note that said, Someone still hears you. We didn't tell people what to do with them. We just trusted the echoes. The last thing I added to the feather room wasn't a letter or a photo. It was a single glove. Grandma's. The one she'd mended with blue thread on her porch while I watched. Age 10. Asking her why she didn't buy a new pair. She never answered. Not really. But now I understood. Some things are worth keeping. Not because they're useful, but because they remember us. I don't write every day anymore. Some days I just sit in the garden, or help someone pin their memory to the wall, or read an old letter with fresh eyes. Camilla visits on Sundays, Corinne on Thursdays. The Feather Room has a guest book now. First name. Date. What did you leave behind? One person wrote, "My silence." Another, "My sister's anger." Someone just wrote fear. I always flip to the last page before I lock up, just to see who's still trying. Some nights, I play the tape one last time before bed. Not because I need to, but because I want to hear her say it again. Jonah, you were always the quiet one, but that never meant you weren't seen. I turn off the tape and let the dark hold me, like memory, like grace, like her.